UAC has been meeting with the legislators, and both I and the lobbyists from Lincoln from UAC have been meeting with the county attorneys. The county attorneys, we have a civil group that gets together on different issues all the time to discuss common issues amongst the counties. And so as soon as the marijuana bill was passed, or actually before they even did this, the change at the legislature, when the ballot issue passed, we got that group together and started talking about what does this mean, because all of those, you're all looking to your county attorney's offices for advice, right? And so we got them all together and we started going through and we filled up an entire whiteboard full of problemed issues that none of the county attorneys had an easy answer for, and assigned them out to different county attorneys' offices to research different issues. We're still working through that list because of how long it is. And one of the big problems that we ran into as we had those discussions was the county attorneys are saying, I can't provide my client any advice on this. Because if I tell them to go ahead and implement, I'm telling them to violate federal law. And if I tell them not to implement, I'm telling them to violate state law. And either way, I lose my bar license. So that's one of the big concerns that the county attorneys have, that you will run into problems with potentially on the issues of how do we implement that. We've got two issues. First of all, there's the general HR issue that Blake talked about, is what do you do with the fact that people now will show up to work and they have been using marijuana. The other bigger issue that we've been dealing with is your health department, who potentially will be delivering that marijuana to people. And right now, the discussions that have been going on with the legislators is we brought that whole whiteboard list to the sponsors of the bill, and they understand that they created a whole bunch of new problems for the counties that weren't there when they talked about all the things that the state was going to do by bringing it to the health department. So they are looking and working with UAC to try and find a way to not have county employees actually distribute the marijuana. It may still look like it's going through the health department, and we've been working with the health department association to keep them up to speed on this. So those of you in the health departments have probably heard this, that right now some of the ideas are the health department would provide office space to state employees who would be in your health department distributing marijuana. Or some other space, storefront, anywhere other than the liquor store or the sheriff's department. Those are the two places that they really don't want to have it be distributed out of, because it just looks bad.
Yeah, everything in the jail.
The jails have to provide medical marijuana to the inmate.
Yes. And so is some of your federal funding all of a sudden is in jeopardy, because that was one of the other big issues. The state already has federal funding issues because they're growing it, they're refining it, they're selling it. So they already are dealing with those issues, and that's our position from the county's perspective is keep it within the state so that it's all your problem. Don't create all these extra problems for the counties. So that's where we're at right now. I know that the governor's office really likes the idea of having it at the community health departments, because that makes it look more like it is a health issue than a recreational use thing, that if it would come through actually the liquor stores make a perfect, they're distributed throughout the state, they have the security, they have everything they need, but that just looks bad. The public perception is bad. So, but again, through UAC and through the Health Department Association, we'll keep you updated on where that goes. But we do have the primary sponsors of the bill understand the issues there and are working with us to try and figure out a way that it's not going to be county employees that are distributing the marijuana. All right, ready to talk fraud? So I've done this presentation, first of all, to the auditors, and then at the spring conference, or excuse me, the fall conference of UAC last year, and then to the treasurers at the spring conference for UAC this year. This came about because of several audits that the state auditor's office had done and suggested that all counties need to have a fraud tip line. Some place for people to be able to call into and report fraud, which is a good idea. But they were pushing it really hard and wanted everybody to get it in place right now. And so the auditors asked me, will you just put together some information? Because I used to do fraud training when I worked for the league in Nebraska, and I was actually certified through the University of Nebraska, go Cornhuskers, to train the clerks there on fraud. And so they asked me if I could look at how do we set up a fraud line, fraud tip line, what should be involved in a fraud tip line, and we found out that there was a lot more to it than what they thought and what the state auditor, I think, thought when they set it up. And the funny part is that the state auditor had just set up their own fraud tip line months before they started writing up counties for not having it. So let's talk about fraud tip lines, and then this is what I presented to the auditors and the treasurers so that you know what they saw, and then we'll talk about the HR implications of this, because there are some. So the purpose is to increase fraud detection, identify weak internal controls that you might have within your systems, and then decrease the fraud comfort. And those are, when I went online and looked at different fraud tip line marketing and things like that, that's what they were talking about. Is, if you have a fraud tip line, the people there that are working for you are going to be more nervous, and they won't commit fraud because they know that there's a tip line. And I'm not so sure that that's going to keep somebody from committing fraud. There are so many things already in place that somebody calling in from the public to report some type of fraud, particularly the embezzlement type fraud, which these are meant to uncover for the most part. I don't know how much that's going to change. Yesterday, you all saw me duck out early, and I was over at the Treasurer's Workshop up in Layton, showing them the movie All the Queen's Horses. Anybody seen that movie? Netflix, they have the auditors that. This is a movie or a documentary show about the clerk in Dixon, Illinois, which is a small town. It's famous because it's the hometown of Ronald Reagan, but a small town about 70 miles or so out of Chicago, 100 miles out of Chicago. Nice little hometown, feel to it. Over 20 years, this city clerk stole $53 million from the city. She had 5 houses. She had a huge ranch. She had 200 quarter horses that she showed and was world champion quarter horse show person years and years and years. And everybody in town saw this happening. She had a $2.5 million motor coach to pull her horse trailers with. And no one called the tip line. So again, I'm not sure how much that a fraud line decreases the comfort level for people, because some of that doesn't go. A few stats on fraud, and this is from the, now I'm going to forget Report to the Nation's Government Edition from the Association of Fraud Examiners. The median loss for fraud was $118,000 and it has a duration of about 18 months. And these are government-related type frauds. Now, when they talk about fraud, they're not talking about just misappropriating dollars. That makes up 88% of government fraud, but a third of it was financial statement fraud, and a fourth of it was corruption. So 88% is they're actually stealing funds. A third is they're just cooking the books. They're not actually taking the money, but they're making it look like either the government is better off or worse off than it actually is. And a fourth of it is corruption, where someone is pushing contracts to a certain contractor. Maybe a family-oriented business or a friend or something like that. And they also include, in that 88% of fraud, that doesn't just include stealing money. It also is when you walk out the back door with a box full of pens or ream of paper, all that kind of stuff is included in there too. That they consider all of that fraud. Fraud detected by tip line is 44% versus 15% by internal audit. So at least from their perspective, much more effective than just trying to do audits. And again, internal audit, that would be your auditor's office catching it. A lot of people think that because you have outside independent auditors coming in every single year and reviewing your financial statements, that would catch any fraud. And independent auditors, that's not their job. They are not looking for fraud. They will not catch fraud. They do a short questionnaire with your auditor asking them certain questions. Are you concerned about your internal controls? Do you see any of these warning signs going on within your county? And if your auditor says, no, I think we're good, they're not going to do anything more with that. They're only looking at the financial statement and whether or not the materials that are presented to them match up with what's on the financial statement. They're not looking for fraud. And I know, I sat on the board of directors of a reinsurance company years ago that had a broker that made off with a bunch of our money. And boy, that board was furious with the independent auditors that they did not catch that. It's like, not their job. Don't be mad at them. Government agencies with tip lines, 66%. 54% of employees are people that make those tips. 17% are anonymous people, and 15% are customers. People coming in and seeing things that don't look right, like they buy their fishing license at the auditor's desk, and then the person puts the money in the purse instead of in the cash box. Things like that. Tip sources, 40% from hotline, 27% from a website, 24% in a letter, and 18% via email. And that kind of makes sense that the further away that people feel they're getting from reporting it in a manner that you might figure out who it is that's doing the reporting, doing the tipping, the more that they're comfortable with it. And for tips that don't come through a tip line, 39% of it is reported by supervisors, 21% comes from law enforcement that identifies it, and only 13% by way of audit. So again, I'm not sure why those numbers with the only 15% is detected by internal audit. Here it says even in conjunction with the fraud tip line, and then audit is only 13% there. I'm not sure if we're not training auditors how to detect and identify fraud well enough, or if they're not looking at that often enough, or what is going on there, but pretty low numbers for the function that is supposed to be identifying that. And that's for those of you who are auditors, that's not a hit on you. You've got lots of things going on. Relationship of size of fraud to the risk. If you have less than 100 employees, this Association of Fraud Examiners says you have the fewest number of cases, but you have the largest median losses. So just like this city in Dixon, there were very few people who worked for the city. This city clerk did it all. She picked up the mail, she deposited the checks, she wrote the checks, she transferred money from one account to the other, she made made the investments for the city, and anytime anybody had any question about what was going on and what was going on with the books, they'd have to go to her, because she was the only person that touched it. If you have between 100 and 1,000 employees, you have slightly more cases on average, but the median loss gets cut in half because there's more eyes that are seeing odd things that are going on. And that way it gets caught sooner and the size of the loss gets cut. If you have between 1,000 and 10,000 employees, you actually have the most cases, but the size of the loss is half again what it is for the group up to 1,000. So it's a fourth of the size of a small employer. Make sense? So with the tip line, your audience that you're going to try and promote this tip line to are going to be your employees. So that's part of where you guys come in, right? Is helping promote this tip line to the employees, the general public, and just overall promotion of it so that people are comfortable with how it works and how to contact it and what's going to happen once they make a tip and those sorts of things, that the expectations are there. Anonymity, this is something that I looked into. You have to look at whether or not anonymity is really attainable or not, whether it's necessary or not to have anonymity in it. And the problems that come up is, how do you confirm any of the information with the tip? And how do you do any follow-up with the tip? Particularly in a tip line where they just leave a message. They're never going to leave enough information. And so how do you follow up? Now you don't know who that was and how you would ever follow up with it. So that causes some real problems with the anonymity issue. The other issue that anonymity creates is, at least with as the state auditor approached me and asked me if, when they saw that the auditors asked me to present on this, and they said, we really want you to promote this, and because we really are concerned about the financial fraud, but we're also concerned about all the ethics violations and things like that. And I said, whoa, wait. Ethics violations are to be reported to the Political Subdivision's Ethics Committee. And they cannot be anonymous. They not only cannot be anonymous, they can only be made by a person who has actual knowledge of that ethics violation. And it has to be somebody that lives and pays taxes in that county that they're complaining about the ethics violation. So why would that be on the fraud tip line? But that's what they want. Excuse me, where did I? So that creates a whole different issue if we start expanding this fraud tip line to a complaint line. And that would make you guys much more involved, wouldn't it? If it's a complaint line. I just saw a county vehicle with a county placard at Walmart on a weekend. What the H? Right? Do we want all those calls coming in anonymously on the tip line? It might be good for you guys to know that that's happening, so you can track it down and tell that employee, you shouldn't be driving the county vehicle to Walmart on the weekend. Oh, wait, I was picking up things for a Monday morning workshop. Oh, okay. But now if you don't know who called in for that complaint, what good did it do? You can't get back to them and say, that person was there on county business, doing legitimate county business on Saturday, and they were working on their own time, as a matter of fact. So if it's not anonymous, now you can actually make that taxpayer know that you did follow up on it and that it was legitimate. Because otherwise they just sit and fume. I even turned them in, and I didn't see them get fired, so they did nothing about it. Right? And they don't sit home. They sit at the coffee shop and say that to everybody else in the county. So again, you need to define what all is fraud and what all types of fraud do you want to have reported on this tip line. Embezzlement of funds, absolutely. If people are seeing things like, boy, the county clerk makes $80,000 a year, and
That's funny.
okay, $40,000 a year, and they have this huge ranch with all these horses. Something's got to be up. Okay, that we want to have, those types of tips we definitely want, right? Inappropriate use of funds, again, driving the county vehicle on the weekend, misusing public property. But the problem that will come with when you say, if you see an inappropriate use of public funds, we want you to report that on the tip line. First call you're going to get is, they shouldn't be hiring a band to play at the county fair. That's a misuse of public funds. Right? There's all kinds of things that people think is not an appropriate use of their taxpayer dollars that you are going to have to deal with on the tip line. And again, I think that you guys are going to get called into this. That's why we're talking about it today. So that you know if all of a sudden there's all these new problems that are coming up, Johnny created a tip line, don't be mad at me, please. Corrupt use of funds, again, there's a whole procedure for you. The governing body or a purchasing agent is pushing contracts to certain contractors for their own personal gain. There are systems set up to be able to do that and to see that. And your bidding process and procurement process and things should be able to identify that very easily without having to get tips from anonymous people on the outside. But it might be helpful to get assistance with that. So we'll look at whether or not that's another piece of the tip line or not. And then, again, unauthorized use of public property. And now that we're already dealing with that, that's a felony, and how we deal with that. They have the tip line flooded with, yep, I saw them. They had the county weed whip, and they took the county mower, or they just went up and down their driveway with the plow. Whether or not we want and need all of that to be reported through a tip line. So as far as how you manage a tip line, you can either have it internal or external. Again, when we talk about tip line, it's not necessarily a phone, but I thought this was a really cool picture, so that's why I used the phone. But a lot of them are just on the website, and they just go onto the website and fill out a form. Again, I don't think that would be as, you wouldn't get as much reporting, because people figure, well, if I go on their website, those IT guys are going to be able to track it back and know, and even with my tinfoil hat, they'll be able to find me. So, or you can do it externally, that there are companies out there that just do this for a living. They manage your tip line for you. You write your script with them. When they answer that call, they Deschutes County tip line, and then they have the script of the questions that they're going to ask them to make sure that they get enough information that you can go forward with it. Generally, they're 24/7, 365s that the person can call or get on their website any time of day or night. And they're experienced people with a scripted questionnaire that they're going to go through at the other end of the phone. So now we've got a tip on our tip line. what do we do now? Well, now we need to screen them first of all to see, is there any real legitimacy to this tip or not? Again, if it's, hey, it's a misuse of public funds to hire a band for the fair, probably not. Do you spend time doing an investigation of that? No, that's just something that you let the commissioners that made the choice to hire a band know. You've got a complaint, just so you know. You have to have some neutrality, so the question becomes, where does that tip go to? Do we send the tip just automatically and all tips to the auditor? Could it be the auditor that is doing the fraud? Do we send it to the sheriff's office? Maybe the fraud is in the sheriff's office. Do we send it to the county attorney's office? Maybe the county attorney is in on it with the auditor. These things can happen. So there's that question of how do we find a neutral party who's going to do this screening and move to the next step of the investigation, so that it's not the person who's committing the fraud who gets the tip. And then authority, if you're going to find that neutral person who may not be involved in any of the money movement through the county, now you got to give that person the authority to look at the tips, to screen the tips, to do investigations of the tips, or to send that investigation out to someone else. And if you're going to send it to another county attorney's office or another county's auditor's office or to the state auditor's office, something like that, that you are giving authority to have that done, to move it to another place. And then, of course, we want to have some level of expertise, because it may be that there isn't the expertise within the county to deal with the tip. I mean, in this city of Dixon, this gal was doing this for 20 years, and they had no idea how to. They said that she had made the bookkeeping so complicated that no one else could figure it out. So even if they would have gotten tips, and actually they did, the city next door, at one point their financial director wrote a letter to the council and said, we're doing great. We have a $15 million fund balance, and you guys are in debt $10 million. We have the same population. We're like 10 miles down the road from one another. You might want to take a look at what's going on. Well, what did they do? They went to the gal that was stealing all the money and said, hey, why are we? And so you might not have the expertise. So now we're talking about the tip line will probably lead us to having to hire external forensic auditors to go in and try and look at what's going on. So be prepared for potential extra costs there. And then as we get to the end, we should be prepared and have everything ready right from the start to be able to write a report on the findings of, here's what happened, we got this tip, we screened it, we did an investigation, here's what the investigation found. Based on the investigation, we've taken these actions, and now we're reporting it out. And who are we reporting it to? Is it an internal communication? Is it being reported to the state? Is it being reported to everyone? Are we having a press conference and doing a press conference on what the results of our investigation did? All of those decisions, I think, better if we make them ahead of time. Cost. The cost actually to hire a firm to run your tip line, Salt Lake County has one, and they hire a firm that takes care of all of the tip line piece of it for them. You pay like $2,000 a year.
for Salt Lake County, not much at all. So it wouldn't cost a lot for that piece of it. Here's where I think the cost comes in, is the promotion of it, is getting the message out. What good is it if people don't know it exists? So the costs of you getting it up on your website, sending out notices, you know, how do you get that message out to everybody in the county that this tip line is there, here's the number, call if you see anything odd. Because if you're not getting that done, what's the value of having it other than to say, yep, we got it, check that box off when the state auditor comes in with that we've got a hotline. Joy?
So we distribute our annual reports throughout the counties. And we also have Facebook, we have a lot of social media content plus a web page. That could all go on there with very little.
That's an excellent idea. Yes, to put the tip information on all of those types of reports that you send out. Because there are those watchdogs, aren't there, that get a hold of those and take a look at them, and that's a great idea. Again, we may be needing to hire an investigator because we're concerned that we don't want to send it to any particular person within the county to do the investigation. And then we have to think about, again, how we're going to report information about our investigation, and what do we do with the grandma issues. Because as soon as the media finds out that there's been a tip and there's been, you know, because, okay, guy calls into the tip line, then goes to the coffee shop, starts telling everybody that he made a tip to the county and he hasn't seen anything happen yet. It's been 2 days and why hasn't he done anything yet? And of course, the local media correspondent sitting there at the cafe as well, having his coffee, and starts doing the grammar request of, I want to know what you're doing as far as the investigation on this tip that was made to the county. So again, just being prepared, having all of that worked out of how are we going to deal with that, I think counties need to be prepared for. The different players that should be involved with this whole process when you're setting up a tip line, the auditor obviously, the treasurer, the governing body needs to be, because providing that authority to the different people that are going to need to be involved in this. County attorney is going to get involved at some point if the tip line works. So we need to get them involved from the start. Law enforcement, because sometimes that's where the investigation will be done, is in your own internal law enforcement division. The third-party vendors that you're going to use, the call line people themselves, investigators, forensic auditors. If you hire a PR firm to do your promotion and your reporting and getting information out to the public about what's happened now that you've uncovered this fraud, and human resources. Because again, I think a lot of this can and will circle back to you guys and become an HR issue. As far as putting together policies, again, to put the tip line in place, as I talked to the auditors about this, I said, make sure that you consider all of those things now when you build your budget, that you potentially are going to have these additional costs that you should be prepared for in the budget. Make sure that you've got the authority identified in your policies and approved by the governing body of who's doing what. And just have all these procedures in place ahead of time. Makes it so much easier than to guess later on, oh boy, yep, we found $25,000 has been skimmed off, and so what do we do now? Do we tell the media? Do we just move forward with the county attorney pressing charges and see if anybody see it happening? I wouldn't wait and kick that down the road and wait until you're faced with it. Make those decisions up front, I think. Charlene, were you involved as you put the tip line in place in Davis County?
Yes, actually, the internal auditor met with my safety team, and we actually started the distribution through through the safety team. And then I actually train every single new hire on the fraud tip line, how to use it, how to access it, what it's for. And then I made sure everything got posted in every building.
Davis County, God love you. I mean, to think to involve the safety committee, the risk committee, was a great idea. And they should. And that's why I told them, you need to involve all these other people, including HR. And then the question was that I posed to the treasurers and the auditors is, do we do this 29 times? Because a couple of the counties have moved forward very quickly because they didn't like that the auditor had written them up, that they didn't have a tip line. So they moved very quickly and got that put in place. But for all the others that were calling and asking me, how do I do this, and can you help me do this? The question is, do we do it 29 times and have 29 separate county tip lines? Or do we do it statewide? Again, it seems from the data that's being put out, the further away from the potential at-fault party that the tip is going to, the more comfortable people are in giving the tip. So why would I go on the Wasatch County tip line to make a complaint about Wasatch County? They're not going to do anything with it. But if it's a statewide tip line, and I know that some of the tips already are coming in on counties and the state's tip line, they're getting stuff on the state, and they're getting things because they promote that special service districts can use their tip line. So they're getting some things on special districts, and they tell me that they've gotten a few things from counties, but I haven't heard back from counties that they got a tip through the state. And for some reason, the state won't tell me any of their numbers of how many tips are they getting on their tip line? What types, what's the credibility of the tips that they're getting on their tip line? Because I would love to know that before the counties all go to a lot of expense putting them in place. If they're, you should do the cost benefit analysis, right? But can't get it.
We've had a lot of tips from the state that are just complaints, but then we have to go through and justify it to the state. So that's the ones we've had.
Yeah, just that those guys don't know what they're doing down there at City Hall, right? Those types of complaints. It's not really fraud. It's not anything you can really do about it. They're just not happy with the job that the county's doing. They don't agree with the way that the county's doing their business. So when this slide came up, both the auditors and the treasurers agreed that, wow, yeah, if we can do this together, let's do it that way. We can all have a tip line, so let's have one big interlocal tip line, and then we can sort this all out. And by doing it that way, those issues with, well, who screens it, and is that person neutral? And what if we need a forensic auditor? Things like that. Well, if we do that through UCIP, now it's not your county screening that and saying, well, that's just a BS complaint. Well, maybe not. And maybe somebody that's more neutral would say, well, we should look into this a little bit to see what's there. So both those entities, associations directed me to, will you please work with UAC and move forward? Can we build a statewide tip line that we can all promote, and it can be promoted through UAC, and the state auditor's office is willing to promote that the counties have a tip line. They just don't want theirs overwhelmed. They think that it's going to get overwhelmed because of you guys, right? Like there isn't enough going on at the state for people to complain about all the state. And now that I know the number, the next time I'm at DMV, they're getting called. So moving forward, we're going to work with the state auditor. We'll coordinate with all those other players to make sure that the county attorneys are comfortable. What role will sheriffs play in investigation? When will we use them? When won't we? How do we coordinate with using another county's auditor to look into what's going on in a county, and if all the counties can make those types of agreements up front and understand that, yeah, if you get a tip about Sevier County, we're okay with that. Your committee that you put together there at UAC, UCIP, is going to screen that. They're going to determine whether or not an investigation needs to be done. They'll decide on where that investigation should be channeled to. Should it go to our county attorney's office, or should it go to our next door neighbor's county attorney's office, or should it go directly to the AG because it's a big deal? And if everybody can agree on those types of things, then we can make this work. And in the interim, there's just, again, all that work. Everybody deciding, making sure that we're all comfortable on how we make this come together and work. And we do have a couple counties that have already set them up, so we can learn what works and what doesn't work from them. We can't get that information. And I'm hopeful that at some point at the state auditor's office, when I keep asking them for it, that they will give me some data on. I don't care what the tips are. I just would like a breakdown of how many credibility, how many all the way to the end catching fraud that you saved the state money did it lead to, would be really helpful to have. Because it's one thing. Are we setting up a window dressing, or are we setting up a procedure that's really going to detect and deter fraud? It'd be nice to know that. Because I think to some extent, and the other big thing that I found when I did the research on this, these tip lines were very successful in the corporate America, especially mid-sized companies that don't have a lot of internal controls. Not as successful in government agencies where there's state law that requires certain internal controls. Like you do have to have an auditor and a treasurer. You can't have, in Utah, you can't have the person that receives the checks and drops them off at the bank also write the checks. You can't, if that's happening, you're violating the law already. You don't need a tip line to know that you're violating the law. So these are really successful in private corporate America. But the usefulness drops when you get into government. I'm not saying that I don't like them. I'm just saying, the value of them, we need to look at how much are we spending on it to get value out of it. And if we're going to set it up, let's set it up right and know what we're setting it up for. Oh, that was it. Again, the issue of that now people are going to complain about a lot of different things, particularly ethics issues. That will come back to you guys, right? This employee is supposedly, buying equipment in small amounts so that they don't have to take it out for them. And that's even a little bit more direct than a lot of stuff that you'll get. Some of it will be, they're part owner of this local business that occasionally does work with the county, that they can't do that. Well, yeah, they can under the law. They just need to disclose it. But now you got that. It usually flows downhill to you guys to deal with it. There's been this complaint about this person. And again, if that person really wants something done about that, they should file that ethics complaint with the ethics committee. Not on a fraud tip line, not some other way. I just want you guys to be prepared that when this comes up, it could put some more work on your desk.
You mentioned the ethics committee. Is each county required to have one? Are you supposed to have one?
Here's how that works.
So that when they passed the ethics laws, they also created the state political subdivisions ethics committee. They've got a state ethics committee for any agency of the state that there's an ethics complaint, it goes to the state ethics committee. For the cities, counties, special service districts, interlocals, any other political subdivision, there's a separate political subdivisions ethics committee that all those complaints go to. Unless the county, city, school district creates their own local ethics committee. If you create your own local ethics committee, now those ethics complaints don't go to the state. And if they do go to the state ethics committee, the state ethics committee is required to send it back to your local ethics committee. Based on the couple cases that the state political subdivisions ethics committee has handled, the County Attorneys Association is very clearly said, we don't want them going there. Their own AG that staffs that committee pulls her hair out. She's like, I tell them they can't do this, and they do it anyway. They're looking at things that they're not supposed to look at, that the statute says they can't look at. They're coming out and doing reports on things and putting things in their report that the statute says they can't put in their report, and they don't care. And they do it anyway. So that the county attorneys are really frustrated with that committee, and they've made that known. So that's a discussion that I'm having with the County Attorneys Association is, maybe we need to also do, because some of them are saying, well, we thought about doing our local ethics committee, but in Paiute County, what's the use? Everybody on that ethics committee is related to whoever the tip is about, to whoever the complaint is about, right? So it's kind of self-defeating. But if you have, again, a regional or a statewide ethics committee that is created and run by the counties, now you don't have that problem. It can be useful, and you're not sending it to the state group that who knows what they're going to come up with. Because one of the things that that committee is supposed to do is send back a recommendation for the county attorney to move forward with filing charges. So they get in that between a hot rock and a hard place again. That, well, so you've been accused of violating the Ethics Act, and you have to go in front of this committee. And this committee at the state, they have subpoena power. They have they can find people in contempt. So they say, Joy, somebody filed an ethics complaint that you work at the health district, but your family also owns the local cafe. The local cafe is regulated by the health department, and you didn't notice in writing your conflict that you are part owner of a business that's regulated by the county, by the agency that you work for, which is a requirement under the ethics law. And you go to the county attorney and say, Dale, I need help. I have to go in front of this scary committee who can find. They want all my phone records. They want all my personal correspondence, all my email. I don't think I should have to give that to them, but they can ask for it. They can subpoena it. And if you don't give it to them, they can hold you in contempt and put you in jail. Dale, help me out. The county attorney's going to say, I can't help you out because I might have to charge you later. So that's some of the concerns with that piece of it, and why when I heard the state saying that these tip lines are great because all these different complaints come in and you can look at a whole wide variety of stuff that might be happening at the county that you want to clear up. And I thought, oh my gosh, all these ethics complaints coming into a tip line and not going to the right source. And plus, we don't have a procedure set up that's really good for dealing with those anyway, because they might go to the state political subdivisions ethics committee. It is a problem. So that's the other one that we're working on, is for the county attorneys to look at putting that together and creating that ethics, either regional ethics committees or a statewide ethics committee for all of those complaints to go to. And what do you guys think about that? Again, a lot of that stuff is going to come through you either at the front end or at the back end. What do you think about that?
I like the idea of regional.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say, I don't like the local. We have so many, like you say, relatives, that everyone knows everybody around there.
Yeah,
So,
right.
I do like the regional, if we're to do that, so.
Because I think the only one that I think has been moving forward on is Washington. Their county attorney's office has been in touch with me about them setting up their local, which in Washington County, you're probably large enough that you can deal with that. It depends on who you select and put on that committee. But yeah, regional, my thought was just sort it out according to your AOG and do it that way. Because you're already working together, so you're meeting, you're doing things together already, just put together a quick interlocal agreement or add it to the AOG and set up your committee. Have you guys dealt with a lot of those ethics complaints yet? I'm not sure how far that law will continue to get pushed. As long as Senator Bramble's in office, I think we'll continue to see things added to the Ethics Act. Require more disclosure by employees. Do you all have a conflict of interest form that you provide to all employees every year, January? I'm sure you have that. Many of the things in the Ethics Act, they have to disclose every year in January. So if you've got a form that you provide them, that makes it a lot easier. And for those of you going, I don't think we have that. Call one of these guys.
We have someone send me your form. You have one? You have one? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. No other questions on fraud, ethics? Well, good. Then we're going to move forward.
I'm not sure that we've got Blake here yet.
Yeah, maybe we can take
Why
a
don't we go ahead
mid-morning
and
break.
take a 15-minute break. Because we're still waiting on that. So, yeah, 9:45 will start.